Hello, this is Mr. Kent of MrKent.com, and I recently put up a couple of new applications on my website to help folks that are maybe just getting into web programming, or if you're just looking for some code. And the first one I put up was on how to create a form, an HTML form that would not be submitted by accident when somebody unintentionally hits the enter key. And then the second one is on validation to make sure that there are no blank entries left on the form, and to make sure that characters used in each text field are acceptable characters, and then also to make changes or delete any characters that get through the first filters. So let's go here to Web Tools, and down at the bottom of Web Tools down here is part 1, which has to do with the enter key, and we're going to take a look at part 2, which has to do with form validation. So that's what we're going to look at today, and we'll go over it and maybe help somebody understand how to design a form ideally. Okay, so this form here is poor design. Nothing. There's not much to. It's a form, and it will submit exactly what you put into it. This form over here has a lot of validation and a lot of JavaScript hooked into it to keep the user from making mistakes. So let's start out with the form over here, and look at some poor design. Let's say we're going to use, let's see, who do we do? We did John, I think we did John Brown, or let's do Bill Brown, B-I-L-L. That's what it was. I get my fingers on the right keys. B-I-L-L, Brown. Now, just back up and go to the previous application. If I hit the enter key, okay, that submits the page, and I don't have all the page filled out. And sometimes if that happens, it goes into a database, and then you've got a wasted record in your database. So let's go back, and so we know not to hit the enter key. And now let's say we're going to put in a username, and you put in a username that's 2 words, like my username. Okay, and of course, normally you don't want a multi-word username, but as we take a look here, it goes in as my username, and that's not a good idea. So a username should be a single name, so it doesn't catch that. And then the phone number, we'll go ahead and put in, let's see, what are we going to put in here? We'll put in, well, we'll leave the area code out. So we'll say 1, 2, 3, and then just anything here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and then we can also put, I just hit the microphone, I'm sorry. We can also put in numbers, and or we can put in our comments down here, but we'll leave those out. Let's just take a look. Okay, so now our phone number goes in exactly like we typed it. And of course, if you're using a database, and these are supposed to be integers, well, it's going to crash. So so that's an example of poor form design, and we won't go any more into this one. Let's go over to this one here, and we're going to use Bill Brown again. And so let's see, we're going to move this over just a little bit here. So we'll go B-I-L-L, and then I'm going to tab down, and I'm going to hit the enter key. And you'll notice that hitting the enter key has no effect, which we learned this on part 1. So now we'll go ahead and type in Brown. Oops, I can't type. Bill Brown, and let's say his username is going to be Bill Brown. Well, let's see. Yeah, we'll say Bill Brown, and we're going to put B-I-L-L-B-R-O-W-N. Let's see. First of all, let's do this. Let's leave the username off, and let's go ahead and submit this just like it is. Okay, so we haven't entered our phone number or anything, so we're going to go ahead and submit it, and we get a little notice that says MrKent.com says that we need a username that's at least 6 characters long. So we'll go, okay, so we're going to make a username that's 5 characters long. Okay, so we'll say BILLB. Okay, that'll be our username. And of course, then it's going to say it's got to be 6 characters. So we're going to go ahead and put it in BILLBROWN, Bill Brown, and we'll submit without a phone number. And we'll see what it says. Oh, we got to put the phone number in. It says enter your phone number with area code. So if you remember on this side, we didn't put the area code in. Let's see what happens if we try it on this side. We'll just say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, and it's going to catch the fact that our telephone number is too short. So we'll go back here and we'll make it we'll say 890. So now our phone number is the right length, and so it would take our phone number. Let's go ahead and take a look at it. So now we submitted Bill Brown. Our username is Bill Brown, and our phone number is okay, and there's where our comments would have been. But let's go back, and let's say, for instance, that we need to have integers in our phone number so that we can feed these into a system that automatically is going to dial. But when the user comes along, a lot of times they put a dash and another dash right there, so that the phone number has the area code separated from the prefix, separated from the suffix. Okay, now we'll go ahead and submit that, and you'll notice just before it changed, it took out the dashes, and so we've got code that automatically does that. So that's called form validation. It sets up the form to be exactly what you need if you're going to be putting it into a database. So that's the purpose of this application. We're going to take a look at the code that causes these things to happen. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to scroll down here to the HTML code and take a look at it. This is in the body part of the index page where we are here. So this is basically, if you want to just copy and paste, here's our form. And as I said before, this div, this is all inside of a container div. All right, we've got a couple of divs in here we're going to take a look at. And so this is the code that you see on this page, and this is form number 2, because on this page, that form that's not all that doesn't do everything was form number 1. So this is a div, and by the way, you can have as many things as you want inside of a form. So here's our form number 2, and you'll notice that it says on submit return, and then there's a space there, and we got to go to a function called validate. So here's our first name, our last name, username, phone number on all these here, and then it gets down here, and our div ends because the top div is going to go to some jQuery that says don't hit the enter key. But down in this section here, we want people to be able to hit the enter key when they go into a text area, and maybe they want to have 2 paragraphs or something like that. In the text area, you want a lot of times you want to give them the opportunity to write several paragraphs. So that's the code on the page. Let's go up here and take a look at, let's just say, for instance, we're over here and we do a paragraph. I'll show you how this works. The first video, or the first video that went with the first page that I created, has this demonstration in it, but we'll just say whoops, PAR1. We'll hit the enter key a couple times, PAR2. Now when we submit this, we expect to have 2 paragraphs, but as it turns out, it looks like 2 sentences. So that's why we have those 2 different divs there. Now we'll go over here and we'll say PAR1 and PAR2 and PAR3, as many paragraphs as we want, and we'll submit that, and you'll notice that they're broken down into paragraphs. So the reasoning behind that div container containing 2 different divs is because as we come down here to the jQuery code, this part right in here is the part that is going to ignore the enter key. And you'll notice that it's in a div called good form, okay? And if you remember up here from this code, this div right here, the first div in our container is good form. The second div down here is text only. So anything typed in this area down here is not going to be affected by our jQuery that limits the use of the enter key, okay? Because there's our enter key code. Character 13 is the enter key. All right, so now let's go down and take a look at some of the validation that takes place in filling out our fields. First of all, and you can copy and paste this and it'll work for you, we have four different fields that we're going to look at. The first one is the first name, the last name, the username, and the phone number, okay? Now, these we have to be careful of because they're going to go into our database. As far as the text area, that's treated different, and so we don't have to be so careful in what goes into there. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to come down here and we're going to check for blank entries. So if my string 1, which is the first name, is equal to null, or there's nothing there, then we're going to put up an alert that says please enter your first name. Okay, so if we enter our first name and leave out our last name, it comes down to the second one and it says please enter your last name. And if we enter our first and last but we don't enter a username, well then it's going to say please enter a username of at least 6 characters. Now here's the thing, up here we just said if the string is empty, then please enter your last name. Down here the if statement says if the string is empty, or, that's the or command, if my string 3, if the length of my string 3 is less than 6, then we are going to tell them they need to make it at least 6 characters long. Okay, so that's the reason for, and that's how we determine that they're going to have to put in at least a 6-character username. Okay, then we come down here to the phone number, and we say the same thing. If a phone number is blank, well then we're going to put up the alert. Or if the length of the phone number is less than 10 characters, we're going to tell them we need to have the area code, because there's actually when you use your area code, you got 3 for the area code, 3 for the prefix, and 4 for the entire length of the rest of the phone number. So we end up with 10 characters altogether. So if it's less than 10, we're going to tell them probably you forgot to put in the area code. All right, so this section right up here of the validation, it checks for blank entries or entries that are too short. Okay, now we come down here to the user input. Now remember, we go up, let's go back up to the top here, take a look at right here. Our string 1 is the first name, string 2 is the last name, string 3 is the username, and string 4 is the phone number. So we'll come down here to these to validate the user input. Now we're setting up a variable that says valid is equal to a bunch of lowercase through the alphabet and a bunch of uppercase through the alphabet. Okay, now so then these are usable characters. This is a continuation of the first line. So we say for I is equal to 0 until I goes through the length of string 1, which is the first name, through its length, okay? And then we'll go through step by step. And so we say then if valid, which is our variable up here, if the index of valid as we go through my string 1, which is the first name, character by character, so if the index of my string 1 at character 1, character 2, and so forth is less than 0, okay, if for instance if it's less than 0, then we have a problem because we're finding well, let's just take it this way. Let's say that the guy's name is character. Okay. So as it goes through this thing, it's looking for the first letter in his username. Well, there it is right there. Okay. So it finds it, and it's actually 1, 2, 3. It's actually going to be at point number 2 because they start with a 0. So he's going to find a 2. So this number then is going to be 2. Then he goes to the next character, which is an H, and he's going to find that right here, and that's like about 10 or something. So this number is going to be 10. So he goes through the entire length of the username, checking against this string right here. And as long as he finds it in this string, whether it's up at 100 or down at 1 or at 0, actually A is 0, then he's not going to have any numbers less than 0, and so this is going to pass. His first name is going to go through okay. But in JavaScript and other languages, if he runs into a character in the first name that doesn't match up with any of these characters, then it's not going to be a 0, it's not going to be a 50, it's not going to be anything. It's going to be a -1, because a -1 represents a fault a false. In programming, a +1 is true, a -1 is false. So if this comes up to be right here a -1, that means he didn't find whatever that the user put into the text box. He didn't find it in the acceptable characters. So that's going to be a -1, and so it's less than 0. And so he's going to stop, and he's going to put up this this little alert that says, you got a character in there that we can't allow. Now, you should probably make this a little more user-friendly when you put it in there, but that's basically what it says. So that as long as he's got one of these characters as it goes through his first name, well, then he's gonna pass. So now we're down to the second one, which is myString2, which is the last name, and it's going to do exactly the same thing. It's going to compare the letters in his last name with the letters in this list, and it'll get a 5 or a 90 or whatever is in here, and then it won't be a 90, but anyway, he'll get a higher number. But if he's used a character in his last name that doesn't match our alphabet, then he's going to get a -1 here, and it's going to tell him your last name contains invalid characters. So he's going to go through all that. Now we come down to the username, and the username, sometimes people want to use a username and it's already been taken, and so they can't use that one, but they could put that same username with a number by it or something. So in this particular case, a lot of times we just allow the numbers that come in as part of the username. And so as he goes through string number 3, which is username, then he says, okay, it's there and it's here and it's there and it's here. But if he's using a character in his username that doesn't match this acceptable list, then he'll get a -1 instead of a 0, and it will tell him that his username contains invalid characters. Okay, now we get down to the telephone number, and so the telephone number is going to have usable characters in it also, and in this particular case, if they put the dash in, that's okay, because it's we can tell them you can put the dash in, because we're going to take care of that in a minute here. So the same thing for myString number 4, which is a telephone. If he tries to put, he spells out area code or something like that, he's going to get, because the alphabet's not listed in here, so he'll get a -1 over here, and it'll tell him your phone number contains invalid characters. So same thing, only we pick out what we want that text box to cover. And by the way, there's even a space there. So if he leaves a space between the numbers, it'll accept it, because that you can put a space in there. And if he separates them with a space, then that's acceptable too. Now we come down here to this. Now we're through validating the input, but we're going to, before we send it to the target page, we're going to go through and we're going to say we're looking for this dash, which was acceptable up here. He can put it in because people usually put a dash in, and we're going to replace the dash with nothing. So what this says is and by the way, this is a replace. This is a way to replace anything in any JavaScript. You put a / and then whatever it is you're looking for, and a / and a G after that, which stands for global. So there are other ways of doing the same thing. This can be used for a lot of different things, but in our particular case, we're just going to use the G. Okay, so my new string for, because here's his phone number up here, is equal to my new string for, but replace the pattern, which is up here, replace this dash with nothing. Okay, so remember when I put the dash in between our my phone numbers, when it hit that right there, it took the dash out and pulled them all together. So document get element by ID, phone to value is now my new string, which is what we said my new string is equal to this. So then it goes back to our phone number entry and makes the change right there before we ever ship it out. So that's what that does. That's this is called form validation, and right there there's a lot of different ways to validate a form, but and I've tried a lot of them, but this is by far the most secure and most solid way of doing it. Okay, and then of course I've included our target page code, so that if you want to just play with it and copy and paste, well, then this will work for you, because this is the PHP page, okay, the target page. So it's going to accept the first name, the last name, the text from the text field, from the text area, and then the username and the phone number. Okay, so now it's going to go through, and if we have put, if a lot of times people don't understand, if you're going to put this into a database, a MySQL database, you're going to have this code all the way through each entry, and there's different ways of doing this, but this is the simple way. Okay, you just copy and paste. But anyway, so the first name, you're going to go through and replace, if there's a quote in his first name, you're going to put a / in front of that quote. Now, in this particular case, we're weeding out all those things, so we really don't need them. But you don't always, in your particular case, if you're going to copy and paste, you're not always going to weed these things out in your JavaScript. So I put this in here so that you can understand. If you're going to put this into a database, you need to make sure that you get rid of all the quotes, single quote, double quote, colons, and dashes, because they're part of the code, and it'll accept that, and then it goes into the database, it'll crash. And then also down here in our text area, we're going to replace the character 13 with an actual break tag, and so this is kind of important for the text area. And then this down here is just what prints out when we send it to our target page. So you can look at that and take a look at it, and let's just say that this is a very good foolproof way of generating code. Let's see, this should drop us down to the code too. Yeah, so this is a good way of generating code that is validatable and pretty much foolproof. If you think ahead and get everything planned out, it'll make your forms submit in a very simple fashion with very few errors or no errors for your visitors. So there you go. That's the form validation application that I've got, and also if you looked at the first one, you learned about how to avoid getting the enter key plus a few other things. This one just takes up the validation to make sure that what people put in is actually going to get there, and in the right order. So I thank you for visiting MrKent.com. We've got lots of other usable tools for you here, and come back often. And thanks for watching the video, and God bless you.